Oh, wait. Okay. All right. So I'm here with Mr. Mooney. We're in Conques, France.
This is great. Thanks for having me here.
Sure. We're actually eating lunch in the high school. Not really in France. But we're looking at a church that is a good example of, can you tell what style this is, Mr. Mooney? Would you say this is Romanesque or Gothic?
I'm going to say that I believe it's Gothic.
Oh, I'm sorry. Try again.
So, looking again, it could be Romanesque.
Okay. What would you lead you to say that?
Well, definitely the windows.
Oh, good. What about the windows?
I would say probably those arches.
Okay, what kind of arches? Would you describe those arches as pointed or rounded arches?
Well, they're definitely rounded arches.
Ah, yes. Okay. Rounded arches are a Romanesque characteristic. Would you say this has an abundance of windows, or they're sort of,
I would say there's a good amount of windows. I don't know if it qualifies as an abundance.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, I would say they're pretty. The windows are relatively sparse if we compare this to a cathedral like Notre Dame, right? Or in Paris.
They have lots of windows there.
Which is a Gothic cathedral, right?
Big, giant windows.
Yes. And so there's another Romanesque characteristic, right? This is a totally different style than Gothic. Okay, so do we see flying buttresses here? Do you know?
Yeah, I don't see anything flying. So I'm going to say no.
That's right.
We seem to have it attached to the structure.
That's right. Yeah. So we have buttresses right here, helping to hold up the walls, but they're not detached the way a flying buttress would be they end up looking really elaborate on a Gothic cathedral. So this is the Church of Sainte-Foy or SainteFoy. I'm not a good pronouncer of it. And but it stands for Faith is her name, really. And so the church is dedicated to this saint who has a lot of lore attached to her.
That's really interesting.
She was a 12-year-old living in 2nd century France when France was controlled by the Romans. And she was an early Christian who refused to sacrifice to the Roman gods. So they put her to death at only 12 years old. So she has, I guess, a kind of some appeal, I guess, as a martyr. Do you know what a martyr is, Mr. Mooney?
So that means that she died for the cause?
Yes, very good. Yes, she died for her beliefs. So the Christians in this part of the world venerate her and dedicated this church to her. So let's look at some more details so we can see more how this is an example of Romanesque. It's very plain. You can see the attached buttresses, the rounded arches on the windows.
Small windows.
Small windows, yes. Because another characteristic of Romanesque churches is that they have very thick walls, almost like a fortress, like a castle, or something that has been made for defense, even though this is not for defense, it's for worship. But since the walls are so thick, and you can almost see it here, you can see how thick the wall is in the windows. They can't get a lot of windows in there. They can't pierce that structure because it's a load-bearing wall. And so when you go inside this church, do you feel like it's going to be a light, bright kind of mood or a gloomy kind of mood?
What I was going to say. I imagine it would be a little dungeon-esque, right. A little dark inside.
Exactly. So that is Romanesque characteristic, okay? And and we see the back here where they have it, though it almost tricks you. It makes you think that there are more windows here when really that's just decoration on the wall. The windows themselves are pretty small. So this wall back here is where the altar is, okay? This rounded wall we know. The kids should know what this is called.
Oh, is there a name for that?
Yes, there's a name for the rounded wall that's behind the altar. And yeah, okay, so it's called the apse wall.
The apse, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
And in a Romanesque church, we have these little chapels that sort of radiate off the apse wall. Okay, you see these little chapels here, right? So they hold the relics. So, Mr. Mooney, do you know what can you tell us something about what it is to be a medieval pilgrim? Any thoughts on that? Do you know what that word means? A pilgrim.
When I think medieval pilgrim, the only thing that comes to mind is Chaucer's Canterbury Tales.
Okay. And that is related to being going on a holy pilgrimage, okay? Because in that story, that's what's happening. So the people in medieval Europe would seek out these famous relics at different churches, and they would go along these well-worn routes that were known as pilgrimage routes. Santiago de Compostela is one of the famous pilgrimage destinations. I think that's part of Canterbury Tales. Anyway, so they would go to this church, and this is considered a pilgrimage church. So they had these radiating chapels around the apse that would hold the relics. Okay, so that's part of what Romanesque churches embody is the ability to accommodate pilgrims. So I'm going to just kind of skip forward here. Okay, so this is not the church, it's a different church, but I just want to show you the layout here, how the radiating chapels, see how they stick off the apse wall? So you would come in here as a pilgrim, the side of the church, this is the transept, and you would come along through the ambulatory and you would stop off at these radiating chapels and exit on the other transept. So they had this great design for traffic flow to accommodate these pilgrims. A lot of times they would have an extended nave too, a longer nave, so that all of those crowds could fit in there. Okay, so the SainteFoy is a pilgrimage church. Okay, so now we had not a whole lot of sculptural decoration, but you have this here, which is called the tympanum section, and the tympanum has a theme. They have it here in the ID. It's called the Last Judgment. So we look closer. Who do you think that might be in the center?
Well, I'm going to guess that that's our Lord.
Yes, that's Jesus. Okay, and hey, what's it look like he's doing?
He is perhaps blessing someone.
Good. So it's the Last Judgment. So if you're on his right side, you're doing good. You know, you're going up to heaven. He's pointing to heaven. If you're on this side, not so good, going to hell. Okay. So here on this side, we have this arcade. The kids know this word, arcade. We talked about nave arcades in the churches that are made up of columns and arches like this. So this arcade seems to house a bunch of people who are the blessed. They're the ones who are on his right side, and they're going to heaven. And now over here, these people are going to hell.
We have the saints and sinners.
That's right. That's right. So these are the blessed, right? They look happy.
They do. They look very well.
Right? They're getting hugs from God over here. Oh, and look at this. There's Saint Faith or SainteFoy, the little girl we just talked about, 2nd century martyr the church is dedicated to. And here is, who do you think this might be?
Says the hand of God.
Beautiful. The hand of God. Yes, we like that in the medieval art. We don't see God's face. We see his hand sometimes blessing her. Okay.
It does seem to be coming from the nether.
Yes, right. Okay. And now we look at hell. Pretty crazy, right? I mean, I always think this guy, what does he look like to you?
He looks like a goblin.
Yeah. I always think he looks like he's from Where the Wild Things Are.
Yes, I see that.
Yeah, but
they're being eaten by that large creature.
Yes, this is the way that he's there. This is the passage to hell. So things are not going well for these people. They look scared. They know what's going on. Let me show you another detail of this. This is the devil. The devil was also enthroned, just like Jesus was, but of course we know he's on the other side of things. We can see this guy being hung. I don't know how well you know your stories from the Bible. The famous character that was hung is Judas, who betrayed Jesus.
So Judas did go to hell. I thought he was forgiven.
Well, I think he hung himself from his guilt. So
I see.
This is him being hung, yeah. And so anyway, we could just kind of look at this forever and ever and see all kinds of crazy things happening to people. This guy is a knight who's being pulled over the fire here. If you see that?
Yeah, it looks like some old-fashioned torture.
Yeah, all kinds of old-fashioned torture, all kinds of crazy things. So, you could imagine as a pilgrim walking into this church and seeing this on the tympanum section, you're reminded of your mortality, that you better be a good Christian. There's this guy being hung upside down. Crazy. I think he was a glutton, so don't eat too much.
Uh-oh.
Okay, so this is the reliquary of Saint Faith, or Saint Foy. That is the relic that most pilgrims came to see. This holds her ashes, supposedly. And it was so beautifully decorated. This encasement, or a reliquary is like a container that holds the relic's remains. The reliquary, the encasement, is made of gold and all of these jewels. And actually people would come and bring jewels like amethyst and rubies and things. They would leave them here for them to be added to her. So it's kind of cool. It's almost like a modern audience participation kind of artwork where the audience has contributed to this piece of art. And I forget the guy's name, but some scholar had written about her and was afraid that people were going to start crossing over into idol worship and start worshiping this object instead of the saint that it represented, which we know to the Christians, that idol worship is a no-no.
Oh, yeah.
So, yeah. And so inside, there's a close-up. Oh, by the way, so her head is made of an old Roman helmet, from, a soldier helmet from Rome before they had been Christianized. So that's been covered with gold and kind of modeled here. So they've used something called spoila, which is the spoils of war, things that are left over or confiscated from war, and kind of appropriated it or used it in a new way.
Egyptian.
Yeah, doesn't it? Yeah. And okay, so I think that's all I wanted to cover for this.
Have they opened her up?
No, I don't. I think that's probably a no-no too. Yeah.
Okay, so the ashes could still be inside.
Yes, if they were ever in there, then they would be still in there. Okay. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Mooney.
Oh, well, thanks for having me.
It was a pleasure.